Picture stepping outside the gates of the White House and feeling the very air turn hostile, an invisible haze creeping into every lungful you draw. An unidentified airborne toxin silently descends upon Washington, D.C., cloaking the Capitol in an ominous pall that defies every protective measure. Citizens rush for gas masks while indoor air purifiers run at full blast. Hospitals overflow with patients exhibiting baffling neurological symptoms. News bulletins flicker with urgent appeals for calm, even as local pharmacies report a 200% spike in demand for antidotes that don't yet exist. Amid mounting fear, whispers of an emergency airborne response begin circulating on encrypted channels and social feeds. Federal officials, under intense pressure to act, invoke a temporary designating of martial law over a 5-mile radius around the White House. National Guard units erect cordons and deploy chemical sensor drones, their blinking lights tracing invisible currents of contamination. Meanwhile, epidemiologists at the CDC race against time, publishing preliminary findings that the toxin's molecular signature bears no resemblance to any known chemical or biological agent. Remember, this is a thought experiment, not an actual policy, nor an unfolding crisis. It is a cautionary tale of how the specter of an unseen enemy can justify sweeping measures, curfews, travel bans, even suspension of civil liberties in the name of public safety. As you listen, ask yourself, how would we balance the urgent need to protect lives with the imperative to preserve personal freedoms? And at what point does the cure become more dangerous than the disease it seeks to contain? Long before any martial law orders or sensor-laden drones took to the skies, the Capitol's air quality had already slipped into a state of emergency. Imagine the EPA's air quality index surging past 200, levels classified as very unhealthy. For 4 days straight, forcing schools and federal offices to cancel outdoor activities and issue health advisories. Local hospitals report a 40% jump in respiratory-related admissions. Pharmacies see a 250% spike in demand for nebulizers and oxygen concentrators. These stark numbers fuel public anxiety as families scramble for home air filtration units and DIY gas mask tutorials flood social feeds. Against this backdrop of rising panic, political pressure mounts for any measure necessary to curb the invisible threat. City council members and federal lawmakers face daily protests. Some demand immediate lockdowns and a full chemical response task force, while others warn that heavy-handed tactics risk trampling civil liberties. Think tank reports circulate proposing everything from travel bans in and out of D.C. to real-time location tracking of symptom clusters. Meanwhile, grassroots activists form ad hoc watchdog groups, ready to file lawsuits if emergency airborne response powers begin to resemble unchecked martial law. In this tense climate, the line between protecting public health and overreaching executive authority grows perilously thin. From the first cluster of mysterious neurological cases, the CDC sprang into action, dispatching hazmat teams to collect air samples from hotspots scattered across downtown D.C. Within 48 hours, their preliminary analysis revealed a baffling compound, a synthetic organophosphate never before cataloged, capable of penetrating standard gas mask filters. With panic mounting, the White House convened an emergency session, and the president signed the Emergency Airborne Response decree within hours of the briefing. Under the new order, a 5-mile exclusion zone was declared around the National Mall. National Guard units erected razor wire barricades and manned checkpoints, permitting only medically screened personnel and supply convoys past the cordon. Drone swarms equipped with laser spectroscopy sensors mapped the toxin's diffusion in real time, feeding data to a joint task force of military engineers and civilian scientists. Meanwhile, hospitals activated triage tents in open parks, isolating suspected victims and rationing experimental antidotes that had arrived from overseas partners under a fast-track waiver. As the city fell under curfew, encrypted channels buzzed with rumors of cover-ups and bioweapon conspiracies. Civil liberties lawyers filed an urgent injunction against the martial law measures, arguing that forced evacuations and citizen tracking apps trampled constitutional rights. Street protests broke out in neighboring counties, demanding transparency in the toxin's origin and the science behind the response. By the time the first mass decontamination units rolled down Pennsylvania Avenue, the line between safeguarding public health and wielding unchecked power had blurred, and a once proud capital stood on the knife's edge of fear and control. Let's turn to two time-worn visions, one from Nostradamus, the other from the prophet Isaiah, that eerily anticipate an unseen scourge and the draconian measures it can unleash. Poisoned air will fall upon the city, the peoples will tremble before the invisible enemy. Here, Nostradamus foretells a lethal vapor wiping out a population too baffled to fight back. A direct echo of our mysterious organophosphate that bypasses standard defenses and drives the capital to martial law. Isaiah 24, 4-5, ESV. The earth mourns and withers, the world languishes and withers, the highest people of the earth languish. The earth lies defiled under its inhabitants, for they have transgressed laws, violated statutes, broken the everlasting covenant. Isaiah's warning speaks to a world poisoned by its own hubris. When humanity breaks its moral bonds, whether through environmental neglect or secret weapons, the ground itself rebels, leaving societies to pay the price in fear and draconian crackdowns. Connection to our scenario. Both prophecies underline a central truth. An invisible threat can justify extreme state power. They challenge us to ask whether, in combating an unseen enemy, we risk betraying the very freedoms we aim to protect. At its heart, the haunting presence scenario reveals how an unseen adversary can dissolve the boundary between protection and oppression. The invisible toxin that seeps into every breath mirrors the way fear itself can become a weapon, unseen yet omnipresent, pushing governments to adopt measures they would never consider under normal circumstances. Just as ordinary chemical masks prove useless against this novel compound, traditional checks and balances falter when martial law powers are justified in the name of public safety. The declaration of an exclusion zone and the deployment of sensor drones echo Isaiah's warning that when humanity breaks its covenant through environmental hubris or secret weapons, the earth and its people pay the price. In our scenario, curfews and forced evacuations become the modern, everlasting covenant broken, trading individual rights for the illusion of security. Similarly, Nostradamus' vision of poisoned air underscores how an invisible threat can cloak draconian tactics in urgency, making the extraordinary seem unavoidable. By connecting these prophecies to our thought experiment, we see a clear pattern. When the line between enemy and emergency blurs, extraordinary powers can become permanent. The very measures designed to protect life risk corroding the foundations of liberty, leaving us to ask whether the cure, invisible as it may be, has become more dangerous than the threat itself. In the wake of the invisible threat, a pervasive sense of vulnerability settles over the city, and soon, the nation. Families that once gathered for weekend barbecues now debate whether it's safe to step outside. Workplaces scramble to install makeshift decontamination stations, and children grow up knowing their playtime could be cut short by a biohazard warning. Local businesses teeter on the brink as foot traffic vanishes and supply chains buckle under prolonged lockdowns. With each passing day, the economy bleeds. Small shops close permanently, unemployment surges, and the cost of emergency medical care soars, leaving many unable to afford even basic treatments. Politically, the fabric of democracy frays as emergency powers linger far beyond their initial sunset clauses. What began as a short-term martial law decree metastasizes into permanent surveillance. Tracking apps remain active, checkpoints turn from temporary barricades into fixture posts, and sensor drones patrol neighborhoods like silent sentinels. Civil liberties watchdogs find themselves mired in endless court battles, while a fatigued public grows indifferent, accepting invasive measures as the new normal. In this new landscape, the line between safeguarding lives and stripping away freedoms becomes hopelessly blurred, reminding us that fear of an unseen enemy can sow the seeds of lasting control, and that recovering lost liberties may prove far more difficult than confronting the threat itself. Even the most urgent crisis response can calcify into permanent overreach if left unchecked. Our haunting presence scenario illustrates how fear of an invisible enemy can open the door to sweeping powers. Curfews, forced evacuations, surveillance drones that outlast the threat they were meant to contain. Once citizens grow accustomed to martial law checkpoints and mandatory tracking apps, rescinding those measures becomes politically and logistically fraught. The result is not only a weakened economy and frayed social trust, but also a democratic deficit in which basic freedoms are eroded in the name of safety. To prevent such mission creep, any emergency airborne response framework should be paired from day one with robust safeguards, sunset clauses, and regular review. Build explicit expiration dates into all martial law and surveillance measures. Require periodic bipartisan legislative reviews every 30, 60, and 90 days to renew, revise, or revoke authorities based on transparent, evidence-based assessments. Independent Oversight Commission convene a standing panel of public health experts, civil rights attorneys, and technology specialists empowered to audit real-time data, investigate policy abuses, and issue public reports. Their mandate must include the power to halt or scale back measures that prove disproportionate. Transparent data sharing mandate. Open dashboards displaying toxin detection maps, hospitalization rates, and the performance of decontamination efforts. Publish the legal basis for each restriction and allow journalists and researchers unfettered access to documents and experts. Community engagement and communication launch a public information campaign in layman's terms, explaining both the scientific uncertainties and the legal protections in place. Create town hall forums, virtual and in person, so citizens can question decision-makers directly and participate in shaping the response. Safeguarding civil liberties. Guarantee individual rights to appeal forced relocations or quarantines with rapid judicial review. Enshrine privacy protections that limit data collection to essential parameters, require anonymization where possible, and ban any use of tracking data for unrelated law enforcement purposes. By pairing decisive action against a concealed killer with these built-in checks and balances, we can ensure that public safety never becomes a pretext for permanent limitation of the very freedoms we seek to defend. Our haunting presence thought experiment reminds us that when fear of an invisible enemy takes hold, emergency powers can quickly outlive their purpose, transforming short-term martial law into a permanent state of surveillance and control. What began as a desperate bid to save lives risks becoming the very mechanism that undermines the freedoms it set out to protect. Now, it's your turn. Do you think draconian measures ever justify themselves in the face of an unseen threat? How would you balance urgent public health responses with the need to safeguard civil liberties? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's unpack these questions together and ensure our real-world policies don't mistake the cure for the disease.